Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about emotional neglect and potential psychological or emotional manipulation that can cause people to have betrayal traumas from their childhood experiences with their parents and caretakers like grandparents or other uncles who might have raised them. And also, the video that I'm linking here tells the story of a girl who thinks that her parents have betrayed her because for 9 years she was left at her grandparents' place and her parents never saw her. And the reason why she was given to her grandparents to be raised by the grandmother was because the girl's parents couldn't afford to take care of two kids. And at the end of the story, we find out that her sister died at 21 years of age. We don't know the reasons behind why this kid was given away to the grandmother. We don't know the reasons why this other daughter died. Now, the parents are trying to reconcile with the daughter, but the daughter is behaving very hurt, and because of the neglect and that childhood that she had with her parents. So, while she has definitely a very logical and emotional reason for being distant with her parents and being rude to them also and disrespectful when they are trying to come back in her life, in this scenario we don't know exactly what played out in the background with the parents and this daughter who was raised by the grandmother. The uncle also intervened in between in the parents and tried to um, let the parents know to keep away from the daughter, right? So here these are very subtle hints, and the grandmother is also supporting this daughter. So both the grandmother and the uncle, who was presumably maybe the either the father's brother or the mother's brother, because you don't know which grandparent raised this child. She could have been raised by a maternal grandparent or a paternal grandparent, and depending on which grandparent raised her, the uncle could be a maternal or paternal uncle. So usually when parents send away their kids to their own parents, it is going to be one of the parents of the either the boy father or the mother, right? So at that time, when the child is sent away to a paternal grandmother or a maternal grandmother, definitely the child will feel hurt that why are they the child who are being sent away. And at a time, parents should be open and honest why they are sending away a child, but many a times parents do not show their vulnerability to the child, which leads to the distancing. Like if the parents were going through some trouble, the child doesn't know exactly what the trouble was, but because the exact things haven't been told to the child can either make up stories, or the child can be given even false narratives by other people who have other ulterior motives in the whole thing. So though nothing in the story shows that the grandmother or the uncle were doing anything wrong with this girl, covert abuse and manipulation or psychological abuse can be like this. You don't know when you were psychologically manipulated by someone, and reason you don't usually know it because you trust those people. And this girl obviously trusts her grandmother and uncle more than her parents. That's why she is unwilling to even listen to anything the parents are now telling her or trying to connect with her. She's unable to connect to them. So it is true sometimes that some parents can be very cruel and callous, and when they are cruel and callous, they can show favoritism to one child over the other. In situations like that, when a parent has shown favoritism to one child over the other, when both children were healthy and both children had no other issues in their health, physical, mental, emotional health, at the time, if parents show a priority or preference to one child over the other, naturally there is a favoritism that happened. And many a times, if that kind of favoritism also happens, if people dig deeper, they might even find out that maybe both the daughters were not biological daughters. One might have been a biological daughter, one might have been an adopted daughter, or one might be the daughter of both the parents, whereas the other might be the daughter of only one of the parent. So when scenarios like that happen and people get in a bind of a financial crunch going on in their life, they can at that time choose to make prioritize who they should take care of. If someone has a favorite child, they want to take care of that child. Or if someone is, both parents are biologically related to one daughter, they would prioritize taking care of that daughter because they will understand that daughter much better than the daughter who is maybe only biologically related to either the father or the mother. And depending on if that was the scenario, say for this girl, and that's why she was sent away to a grandparent. So if she was biologically related to the father, she could have been sent to a paternal grandparent. If she was biologically related to the mother, she could have been sent to the maternal grandparent. Or even if both childs were biologically related to the father and mother and the child was not even an adopted child, sometimes why would parents have this dilemma of which child to take care of? What if one of the children got cancer, AIDS, organ damage, where they have to go for kidney transplants? Let's say they have kidney damage and they have to go for kidney transplants regularly. So what if the child is, or the child was really mentally ill or handicapped for some reason and needed some special education and special caretaking in the home life, which possibly was wearing down the parent who was the major caretaker of the children? And if that was happening, then at that time parents also have to make a decision. If they are not able to pay attention to both kids, when one kid needs more special attention, that time also they will want to take that call. What if apart from someone having an illness, and because this elderly other daughter has died, that makes me suspect more that some disease was at play in the whole story, that some chronic disease, long-term illness, a very hard disease that needs a lot of caretaking from someone, something like that unfolded in their life. Either disease or disability could have happened, because of which these parents were financially crunched and also emotionally worn out. Because if you are at least from a moderately income family or a higher income family, if you're getting worn out by caretaking of a person who is sick or person who is disabled or person who has some mental illness or physical illness that needs a lot of caretaking, at that time if you are at least above middle class or even upper middle class and really rich, any of those people can have a alternative choice of hiring some caretaker temporarily or long term for the person who is needing some extra caretaking. But most other people who are from lower middle class family, who are on paycheck to paycheck kind of a income, globally in any country of the world, I have only seen two countries, India and US. But I know in US also there are people who live paycheck to paycheck. In India also there are people who live paycheck to paycheck. Or even if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, in US there are states where you can get fired very easily from your job. So people have to put a lot of efforts to retain their job in those countries. And when they have to put a lot of efforts to retain those jobs, and India also that is problem, you have to put a lot of efforts to retain your job, because in India there is a overpopulation problem. So the number of jobs in proportion to the population sometimes is not appropriate in our country. So and as a result, if you look at the statistics in India currently, there are a lot of unemployed. The percentage of unemployed in India is high. Educated unemployed and really highly educated unemployed is also very high. And I'm one of those people, so I understand this scenario even better. And so when you are educated or uneducated, when you have low income or moderate income, if you are going through a financially binding time, and many illnesses like cancer, AIDS, organ damage, they require extra money. If both parents are working, sometimes in US you will not qualify for Medicaid even if both parents are working. And if one parent was only working and they qualified for Medicaid, if they are like really that low income, even after qualifying for Medicaid, the medications are so expensive. In order to qualify for Medicaid also, your financial situation has to be so dire that you're living in poor housing, you're living in places with really bad food and water and other kinds of amenities. and you have to be really, most of the time, really be that level poor to qualify for government funding for medicines. And if you're not that poor, if you're even slightly above the poverty line, then also it's stressful, because even if you don't, government doesn't give you free medicine, you are paying for the medicine out of your insurance. You have to work doubly hard, you have to have 2 3 jobs sometimes to pay for not just your living costs, because normally in cost of living in certain cities of US are so high. If you're just barely above the poverty line, or above the qualification of Medicaid, some of those people have to work 2 jobs simply to sustain living in that particular city. And then if there is a debilitating disease also playing a role in your life, apart from just taking care of the having 2 jobs, you have to also now take care of the child. So that adds to it. The cost of child caretaking also is high, so if you're not that rich, you can't afford that. So all of this means either both parents are overworked all the time, just working outside the home, and then inside the home caretaking a disabled or debilitated child, as someone who needs a lot of caretaking, physical caretaking. Whereas, because that is double work, people don't usually realize. But if you, and I have seen patients, I had patients whose sons were, or children were on disability, and I saw some mothers who were really like so weak, so frail, so fragile. I'm remembering one particular patient actually right now, and she was like that because her son was in Medicaid and had organ damage. And even though her son got help for medicine, she's getting help for medicine. If she is constantly taking care of that child, if she has also some job to qualify for Medicaid, she has a very low income job, so she doesn't likely even have good food to eat, because she was really gaunt and frail looking. And even though she was in her 50 plus or 60 plus years of age, she had no one to caretake this whole scenario with her child, who was an adult, possibly in his 30s and all at that time. But it's a child who has been raised for years and years, needing some caretaking and support every day of his life. And because these people are poor and can't afford any home care related help, what do you think, who's taking care of that son? This lady is taking care of the son, the lady is taking care of the work, lady is doing whatever work she can afford to do given the circumstances of her life. And here, I think she was a single lady, meaning maybe her husband died or her husband divorced her. But that's what I presumed, because I never had any medicines for her husband that was picked up. So I'm assuming she was single. She was a single mom who raised this child. But in this daughter's case, her parents are two parents home. But even if it is a two-parent home, if the disease that someone has is very challenging disease, sometimes you can't afford to either pay for it, as well as you have to work a lot of extra hours to pay for the costs of healthcare. So, not just the financial cost, but there's a literal physical caretaking related cost also that comes into the picture. And at that time, if they don't have money to buy enough food, they can't afford to take care of 2 kids. There is an emotional need a kid has, physical needs a kid will have, clothing, housing, studying related attention, all these things kids will have that they were personally not able to, they thought they wouldn't be personally able to provide. Now, they might not have told the daughter that your sister has this debilitating disease, or even if they didn't tell the daughter, even if some of the symptoms of the disease were showing up in the other daughter while she was living with them, she didn't realize or put 2 and 2 together that this girl was very severely ill. So that's why this girl was sent to her grandparents. Now, if her parents were really busy, really occupied with challenging circumstances related to the daughter and their work life, it is possible they couldn't have the time to connect with the other daughter. But even then, them not connecting with her for 9 years seem a little suspicious to me, Because if the parents were challenged with a physically unhealthy daughter who needed caretaking and they needed money for that caretaking and everything, even then, if they were that caring for a daughter, they would be equally caring for the other daughter too. And the only way this daughter got isolated for 9 years from talking to her parents would have happened if the uncle or the grandmother or anyone else she was living with in that grandmother's place prevented phone calls from happening, or if the parents wrote her a letter, she never got the letters that were sent for her. Because there are, unfortunately, in this world some people who do this, who have this either jealousy or they maybe her grandmother really loved her staying here, so the grandmother didn't want the granddaughter to leave. So even if her parents might have sent money that come to us for vacation for during the summer vacation time or during Christmas, the grandmother didn't want to let the daughter go. So if the grandmother didn't want the granddaughter to go and visit her parents, she could have played some mind games. If the grandmother didn't, maybe all of them did it, but in their own subtle ways, and not realizing that over a span of 9 years, this girl hardly ever or never got to connect with her parents. That could have happened. Or the parents were really, really working such hard time jobs that they were super exhausted from everything and they couldn't take care of even thinking about calling her, because they just assume the daughter is doing well. They might have called the grandparents, but the grandparents could. And some people, when they are playing the psychological manipulation, some do it deliberately and some do it non-deliberately. Now, given the scenario of this story, I don't think they did it very deliberately, but it just happened that they isolated her from her parents. And maybe the uncle or uncle's family loved her so much, or grandmother loved her so much, they wanted her to be treated, they treated her like the real daughter, and they didn't want the competition from the biological parents. And that's why also they might have socially isolated her, manipulated her, and brainwashed her into thinking that her parents don't care about her. When the reality was, even though the parents were caring, it could be possible that the parents were calling, but if they were calling, say, in the daytime and she's gone for soccer practice, or in the weekends she is visiting a friend for a birthday, or if she is going to school at a particular hours, but the grandparents and uncle never notified the parents that these are the hours she won't be at home, call her at these hours, and they never put two and two together because they're too busy. If you're a busy person, you're hardworking, you're working 80 hours a week, say one parent is working 18 hours a week, another is working 30 hours a week and outside the home and inside the home constantly taking care of the child. If they are constantly like on a roll taking care of a diseased and sick child, sometimes you will just trust whoever you trust, right? They are trusting that the grandparents and the brother, they will all, whoever's brother it was, that uncle, they just trust them that they are doing the best for me. So they're not going to sit and think that my family is going to betray me, my family is going to play mind games with my daughter. They're not thinking like that. They are just thinking they're grateful that their family is taking care of the daughter. They could have even been sending some money to the other grandmother's family to take care of the daughter, and that money that was sent to take care of the daughter, maybe the uncle or the grandmother used it for their own nefarious purposes. So even if, say, after 5 years these parents were stable enough to want this daughter to come back to them, the grandmother or the uncle could have lied also and said that, your daughter is in college now, let her, she's in high school, she has a good friends, let's not move her schools. They could have given that excuse because they wanted the money. They could have given other excuses related to your daughter doesn't want to talk to you. And they would have assumed that being a teenager, maybe she doesn't want to talk, because teenagers also go through that phase. Whatever the reason, these parents could have been, actually speaking, very understanding parents, but they were socially isolated from the daughter by the people who were caretaking her. And the daughter doesn't know that she's getting socially isolated by her grandmother or the uncle, because for her, these are the people who have been caretaking her for 9 years now. So she trusts them more, she's trusting their words more. But if she trusts them more and doesn't take the time to understand what was going on with her parents, she'll do a great disservice. If indeed her parents were caring towards her, her parents had sent money for her upbringing, her parents had tried to contact her, her parents had maybe even sent her letters or tickets to come and visit them when they were in vacation time, or wanted 2-3 days of a vacation with her. And because they couldn't move because the other child was sick, they wanted the daughter to come and visit them. But none of those played out in the 9 years, and she thought her parents are ignoring her, neglecting her, when it wasn't really her parents ignoring or neglecting her, but other people who interfered to make it seem as if neglect was going on. And while she's really pissed off with her parents currently, if she doesn't clarify what was actually going on, she will continue to hold a grudge when the parents didn't do anything at all than be the best parents they could given the circumstances. And that's why also it's very important for her to also investigate, was her sister really sick the whole time, 9 years, when she was living with her grandparents? And if her sister was really sick, and if she really had organ damage, cancer, AIDS, or any very severe mentally damaging or physically damaging illness, many of those illnesses can have a root cause in the environmental toxins of the place we live. So in fact, her parents had done her a favor by sending her away to a different city, in a different place than the home they were living in. And in fact, if the organ damage or whatever health issue this daughter had, the daughter who died, that daughter, whatever health issues she had while she was living with her parents, say, she had cancer. And her parents were also very tired, not simply by taking care of her, by working hard, extra jobs and everything for the cancer treatments and things like that. But what if that same environmental toxins that were causing cancer to this daughter was also slowly chipping away the health of the two parents as well? Because environmental toxins can impact everyone's health in different ways. So the same environmental toxin, if I have environmental toxin like lead inside my homes, or my water has pesticide contamination, or my neighborhood has fungicide contamination, or my water supply has some chemical contamination, all of these, if even one is there, there is health risk. But if 3-4 places you have some, and because if you're low income, you will live in low income housing, which could have all these lead poisoning, pesticide poisoning related problems. So whatever, or chemical toxin, heavy metal poisoning, these things will happen. Plus, if you're low income, you're eating mostly low income food, and the low income food that you have access to also usually has a lot of pesticides, fungicides, and chemical contaminations in them. So which makes all of them actually more liable to get sicker and sicker, depending on where they are living, what they are eating, what is the environmental factor impacting their health. And even if 3 people or 4 people are living in the same house, exposed to the same number of chemicals or same types of chemical and toxin exposure, each person, depending on, if the father works 80 hours outside the home, his health will be impacted more by the work he's doing outside the home, less by the environmental toxins in his home. The mother who works only maybe 10-20 hours outside the home, her health will be more impacted by environmental factors of the home, a little less by the 10-20 hours work environment factors. The daughter who doesn't go to school maybe, or goes to school and stays at home most of the time, that daughter who was sick and staying at home most of the time, again, for her also, her major health impact will be coming from the environmental factors of her home. If she goes to school or visits other people, some of it will come from the other places' environmental factors, like the school's environmental factor. If she goes to a playground to play, then the playground's environmental factor. If she goes to a library to study, the library's environmental conditions, these will be impacting that daughter. Now, this other daughter who was sent away from this home, if she had continued to live, then she would also have got very sick. Because if environmental factors were causing one daughter to fall sick, it is very likely it can cause another daughter to fall sick too. And while the same environmental factor can cause cancer in one person, chemicals, heavy metals, pesticides, they are liable to cause both uh, cancer related diseases, but they are also liable to cause organ damage. And in one person it might cause cancer, another person it might cause organ damage, or the cancer might develop. If in one person the cancer develops while you were 10 years old, in another person the cancer could develop when you are 20 or 30 years old, because depends on how much resilient your body's cells are, what food you were eating, what other environmental factors were helping or not helping your health, and what are the individual specific factors also which are helping or not helping your health. So if the other daughter had got sick because of environmental factors, which is something also that they can investigate if needed, then they actually did a favor to this daughter by the daughter never having contact with these parents and coming and visiting them in the 9 years. Because in the 9 years that the other sister got weaker and weaker were the same 9 years by her parents letting her go to stay with the grandmother. That same 9 years of living away from this kind of an environment meant that she is now not as sick. Then there's other issues. What if it is possible that if none of these scenarios were playing out in the background of manipulation by someone or social isolation by the grandmother and uncle, or deliberate not allowing communication to happen between the parents and the daughter, if none of these were playing a role, if the other daughter was not sick, the parents simply had a financial crunch that caused them to send away one of the daughters, even that financial crunch could still be a moderate factor that she should consider for her parents having sent her away. But again, the daughter having died, if she died of any natural causes or diseases and illnesses, definitely environmental factors were at play, and again there was a blessing involved. If she even died because she had, say, a bad social group with whom she was hanging around and she died in an accident, again it's the same thing. Parents being busy with work could mean that the daughter was not taken care of even in that home, whereas the other daughter was at least with her uncle and grandmother who took care of her better. That's why she never fell into bad company and she never got into doing, say, hanging out with people who were doing drugs or alcohol. She may or may not have done it, but even if you hang out with people who are doing drugs and alcohol, you can end up in an accident anytime and die out of the consequence of irrational or irresponsible behavior of others, right? So whatever was the reason for that other daughter's death is the same reason this daughter could have also died or had a bad life if she had stayed with her parents in that area. So she should definitely consider all these factors. And finally, in very, very rare cases, it is very possible that the parents neglected her, deliberately neglected her, didn't like her, didn't were really truly cruel towards her. And if that is the case, then it is absolutely okay if she never contacts her parents or never wants to connect with them again, especially if the grandmother and uncle have been really good parents and caretakers for her. But even then, at least at the minorest level, smallest level, 10% level, 5% level, she should still hold gratitude that she was given away to her grandmother, where she found better love and caretaking in her grandmother's home. So I hope this makes sense. And in all this, if you put forgiveness into the picture, understanding into the picture, try to understand the other person's limitations into the picture, it helps you become a better human being. It will help the girl become a better human being. And this post is not simply for this girl, but for anyone who has faced childhood neglect, anyone who has faced childhood isolation, anyone who has been not caretaken as much by their caretakers as they should have been. If you develop a little bit of a understanding as to why that developed in those people's lives, if you can't even patch things with them, what it helps you do is to bring peace to your own self, and to bring clarity about the situation helps you in then when you get into the same bind as them, because karma is like that. If you don't forgive them, or even if you have forgiven them, sometimes in future life when you are a 40-year-old person struggling with finances, you might be put in similar dilemma as the parent you didn't understand. So at that time, what would you do? If you had understood your parents better, or understood what was going on, even in terms of betrayal and manipulations, then you will understand as a 40-year-old. Because if her uncle or grandmother were greedy and monetarily motivated to isolate her from her parents, then at 40 years of age, when she's trusting only her grandmother and uncle, what will happen is they would be taking advantage of other things that she could have legal rights to, that they didn't give to her. And when she's struggling with finances, they could also make her struggle with finances. Because if there was monetary motivations, these uncles could have even anyway, that would be a little bit too much overthinking. But there are other scenarios also when people can play games about getting property and finances from people without people realizing that they have given away property and finances to someone who unwittingly, or were taking advantage of covertly without them realizing that this covert manipulation was going on. So if something like that is going on, eventually that covert manipulations, red flags and actual long-term abuse will also show up in 10-20 years of that daughter's life who is surviving. If covert manipulation was not going on, if it was just simple human mistakes that were made, again the same kind of human mistakes could be made by the daughter also in her future life, when she has to take care of people, like she has children and she is now wondering which child to take care of when she is in a financial crunch, or when her husband is in a financial crunch, or when her husband leaves her, what will she do as a single parent? These kind of situations can strike her. Whereas if she had built a good bond of understanding about her parents' scenario from her parents' life lessons and parents' choices, if she even speaks to them more clearly about why they made certain choices, she will get a better picture of why they made a certain set of choices. And if the parents are not open enough to discuss all this, that's a different issue. There are some parents who don't discuss this. In India, there are parents who are like that, who are very tight-lipped. They don't want to talk about their struggles and problems, and they just assume you should just let parents be the way they are. But it doesn't work like that. The world is changing. So parents, if you are struggling, you need to mention your struggles to your kids, because you've been usually given kids who will understand your struggle. God doesn't give you a child who will not have the capacity to understand your struggle. But if you don't reveal the whole extent of the struggles that you're going through, the child can't share your burden in the right way. And if you falsely paint a false picture, then also, even though the child shared your struggles, then you have created a false scenario where you will pay the karmic consequences also. Because the grandmother and the uncle could have painted a false picture of the struggle they were having. They could have said, your parents never send us money, we only have to take care of you, and this, that. A child could have grown up like that also, thinking her parents never cared about her when her parents were continuously sending money. But she was made to believe the other way. And that is another problem zone. So all these, the truth of whatever was actually happening, that's why it needs to be clarified. And it can only be clarified if she actually takes the effort to speak to her parents. If the parents were a problem, they will never speak openly about things. Or if the parents are really struggling now with their own health issue, again it might be a little difficult. But each person where the problem is, the one who is the culprit will always will potentially be gaslighting, manipulating, not wishing to connect, not wishing to build bridges. These are the people's characteristics of those who know subconsciously or consciously that there's some error they have done, but they are in denial of that error. And those kind of people could be narcissistic people, selfish people. So yeah, some parents could be that way also. But very rarely, if a family has two daughters and they really had a genuine reason for sending one daughter away, and then that means they were genuinely caring parents, and they thought of the better interest of the child than their own emotional connection to the child. So in my intuition says these parents were that kind of parents. They were not the neglectful parents, because neglectful parents behave in very different manner. And any kind of neglect that still happened in the child was a false neglect, or a false perception of neglect, or an illusion of neglect that was either created by the circumstances these parents were existing in, or a part of it was also created by the grandparents and people who raised the other daughter, who was being raised by the grandmother. So that's why people should be careful when they're judging someone in their own family or others. and take more time and thought and energy into not just forgiving but figuring out what actually happened than assuming things that were not true or believing only one side's narrative without listening to the other side's narrative as well. And again, if she manages to find the right answers, it will give her the peace that she seeks, give her the clarity that she seeks, and also make her understand that everything that happened with her in her life might have been a blessing in disguise, even though for her it seemed like a curse for many years. But it can only have been a blessing in disguise if she unfolds the with better clarity and balance whatever actually ensued. If she keeps viewing it at a myopic lens of just her selfish needs or the narrative that her grandparent and uncle were spinning for her, then she will not find that peace, she will not get that clarity. But if she turns the lens into a balanced lens and forgiving lens and understanding lens, then she might get better access to peace and forgiveness, and also future better quality life with the people who actually genuinely care about her. Because this also happens when gaslighting, manipulation and covert abuse happens to someone, and if that was happening with the grandparent and the uncle for monetary or other motivations, whatever the reason this was happening to this child where she was isolated from her parents, if the parents were the ones who were gaslighting and manipulating, of course she needs whatever she is doing is the right thing. But if the grandparents were doing it, or if it was a combination set of circumstances where kind of no one was really at fault, no one was deliberately being cruel or anything, then all it needs is she has to just mature as an individual in life. If she matures, then that maturity will help her with her life problems. If she doesn't mature or learn the lessons that all these scenarios were meant to play for her in her life, because everything that happens, all of these things that unfolded for her, if no one was at fault, it was simply karma playing something, that some future karma has to unfold because of which she went through all this. Or it could be some present karma she has to go through because of which she faced these situations where no one was at fault. It was just the life circumstances that caused it. And if someone was indeed responsible for deliberately and cruelly and callously doing something, you have to learn the lesson of understanding those kind of people also, because those kind of people will betray you constantly. And then how long are you supposed to take their betrayal then? That question also has to come up sometime in your life, that how long do I take this betrayal? Should I continue taking this betrayal? But in order for you to understand who betrayed you, you have to first listen to everyone and understand what other things were in play before you just assume that someone is betraying you. Here the girl is assuming that her parents betrayed her, but what if they didn't betray her? Or what if the things related to what she feels is a betrayal and neglect were many other factors that are normal part of living? So I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, want any other clarity on this topic, please drop a comment. Thank you.